Hi, super readers. Today we are going to be working on a really important skill called retelling. So I can't wait to get started. Let's get going. First, I want to tell you about a time that I had to retell what happened. We can retell stories, but we also might retell what happened in our own lives or in something like a movie or a TV show. And that's the case in what happened to me. So last summer, I was taking my daughter, Millie, who was 3 at the time, to the new Toy Story 4 movie in a movie theater. And I wanted to retell her what happened in the very first Toy Story movie. So I had to tell her who the characters were, like Woody and Buzz, Bo Peep, Potato Head, and even the little sister Molly and the boy next door that was mean to his toys named Sid. Do you remember him? I also had to tell her where the story happens. So I said, there's these toys that come to life in this boy named Andy's bedroom in his house. And then I also had to tell her like what happened in the movie so she would understand. So I said, first, there's a new toy that comes to the room named Buzz Lightyear, and the main character, Woody, and him don't really get along. And then a big problem happens where Woody and Buzz get left at a pizza restaurant. And a mean boy that lives next door to Andy gets them as a prize and he brings them back to his house. And the movie is all about how they end up having to work together to escape from Sid's room. There's a really crazy thing, too, that Andy and his family are moving, so they don't have much time. Finally, the problem is solved at the end of the movie when the other toys from Andy's room work together to get Buzz and Woody back. RC, the race car, drives them to the van, and everything ends up being a-okay. So that was my recap and my retell of what happened in the movie Toy Story 1. Today, I want to teach you that readers can talk about what happened in their story in a way that's easy for others to understand, even if that person has never read the book you're talking about. This is called retelling. So that is the skill we're working on today is retelling. So let me teach you how to retell a story. When you retell a story to someone, you must tell them about who was in the story. Who's in the story? That is called the characters, and they might be people, or some stories have animals that can talk, right? Or in the case of Toy Story, toys that can talk. So for the characters in Toy Story, we're talking about Woody, Buzz, Rex, Slinky, Ham, Sid, Andy, the boy. The main characters are really Woody and Buzz, Sid, the mean neighbor boy, and the little boy Andy. I would say are the most important characters, but there's many more also. Another thing that you must tell someone when you are retelling a story to them is where the story took place. That's going to help them to understand what you're talking about more. Where the story happened and when it happened is called the setting. So the setting of Toy Story 1 is mostly in Andy's room, isn't it? The boys' room. But part of it also took place at the Pizza Planet restaurant and in the mean neighbor boy Sid's house too. So those places are worth mentioning. And the last thing you must do when you are retelling a story to someone is you need to tell them what happened, right? The events of the story. And these need to be in the correct order. Eek, that's hard. You have to kind of think about it. But if you're telling somebody a story in a jumbled up order, it's really hard for them to follow what you're talking about. So you need to start with the beginning. So, like I said in Toy Story 1, at the beginning, a new toy comes to Andy's room named Buzz Lightyear. He meets the leader of the room named Woody, and they have some trouble getting along. Then you're going to tell what happens in the middle of the story. And most times in the middle of the story, there's some sort of problem that crops up. So the problem in this story is that Woody and Buzz get separated from all the other toys. They end up at Pizza Planet and the mean neighbor boy Sid gets them. Okay? And then they're working together, right, to try to get away. So the ending is what you have to tell next. And the ending is usually when whatever problem has happened gets solved in a lot of stories. Not every story, depends what type of book it is, but in many stories. So in this case, Woody and Buzz team up, they escape the mean boy's room. RC the race car gets them back, and they end up in the van with Andy and his family living happily ever after. Kindergartners, this is a special five-finger retell storytelling hand that is a way to help you remember the 5 things that you must remember to retell a story. So your thumb, if you can touch your thumb with me right now and say characters, that's the people and the animals of the story, right, that are important in the story. Now I want you to touch your pointer finger and say setting. Ready? Setting. Remember, the setting is where and when the story happened. Touch your tall middle finger and say beginning. So next you're going to tell what happened at the beginning of the story. How does it all start out? Touch your ring finger and say middle. Ready? Middle. The middle of the story. What problem crops up? What's happening in the middle of the story? And finally, touch your pinky and say end. Yep, end. How does the story end up? Is it a happily ever after story, or what happens? That is one way. If you put your hand up and touch each finger, that's one way to remember all the important things to include in your story retell. So we're going to practice this together right now by watching a story video of Goldilocks and the Three Bears by James Marshall. This is kind of a funny version of it. Let's watch it now.
Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
What a sweet child.
Sweet.
That's what you think.
That's what you think.
Once there was a little girl called Goldilocks. Yes, I'll send Goldilocks to pick up the muffins. You must promise not to take the shortcut through the forest. I've heard that bears live there. I promise, said Goldilocks. But to tell the truth, Goldilocks was one of those naughty little girls who do exactly as they please. Meanwhile, in a clearing deeper inside the forest, in a charming house all their own, a family of brown bears was sitting down to breakfast. Patooey! This porridge is scalding! I've burned my tongue! Cried big old Papa Bear. I'm dying! Cried Baby Bear. Now, really, said Mama Bear, who was of medium size. That's quite enough. I know, said Papa Bear. Why don't we go for a spin while the porridge is cooling? I don't mind if I do, said Goldilocks. Patooey! Porridge in the biggest bowl was much too hot. Next, she tasted the porridge in the medium-sized bowl. But that porridge was much too cold. Then Goldilocks tasted the porridge in the little bowl. And it was just right, neither too hot nor too cold. In fact, she liked it so much that she gobbled it all up. Feeling full and satisfied, Goldilocks thought it would be great fun to have a look around. Right away, she noticed a lot of coarse brown fur everywhere. They must have kitties. In the parlor, there were 3 chairs. I don't mind if I do, said Goldilocks. But the biggest chair was much too hard, and she just couldn't get comfortable. The medium-sized chair was much too soft. Then Goldilocks sat in the little chair, and that was just right. Neither too hard nor too soft. Now all that rocking left Goldilocks quite tuckered out. I could take a little snooze. But the head of the biggest bed was much too high. Next, she tried the medium-sized bed. But the head of that bed was much too low. Then Goldilocks tried the little bed, and it was just right. Soon she was all nice and cozy and sound asleep. She did not hear the bears come home. The 3 bears were mighty hungry, but when they went in for breakfast, they could scarcely believe their eyes. Somebody has been in my porridge. Somebody has been in my porridge. Somebody has been in my porridge and eaten it all up. In the parlor, the 3 bears were in for another little surprise. Somebody has been sitting in my chair. Somebody has been sitting in my chair. Somebody has been sitting in my chair and broken it to smithereens. Somebody has been lying in my bed. Egads! Somebody has been lying in my bed. Look, cried Baby Bear. Somebody has been lying in my bed, and she's still there. Now see here. Who was that little girl? I have no idea. But I hope we never see her again. And they never did.
All right, readers, I hope you were paying close attention to that book video, because now we're going to have a chance to retell it. You're going to need to talk about this book to somebody at your house. So if you need to, pause this video for a second and call over somebody at your house. It could be anyone at all. If no one's around, then you might have to grab a stuffed animal friend or something like that. Okay? Go ahead. All right, get out your 5-finger retell hand, touch your thumb. The first thing we are going to do is tell our special person who the story was about, so the characters. Go ahead and do that now. Pause the video until you're done talking about the characters in Goldilocks and the Three Bears. All right, let's check your work. Hopefully you mentioned Goldilocks. She's the main character, isn't she? And I bet you talked about the bear family, Papa Bear, Mama Bear, and little baby bear. And I'm wondering too if some of you included Goldilocks' mother. Now, she is a pretty small character in the book, but the book did start out with her telling Goldilocks to go on that walk, didn't it? All right, take out your story retelling hand again and touch your pointer finger. Now tell your special person where the story happened. Where did the Three Bears story happen? That's called the setting. Go ahead and pause the video and tell them now. All right, check your work. Did you say either the woods or the Three Bears house? If you did, you are correct. Give yourself a pat on the back. All right, kindergartners, now this is the part that takes a little bit longer to talk about, okay? We are going to get our retelling handout for this because we're going to need our middle, ring, and pinky fingers for the beginning, the middle, and the end. It's time to tell what happened in order. So you're going to tell the events of the story in the correct order, beginning, middle, and end. So your special person now. Pause the video and go ahead and do that. And let's check your work with telling what happened with the story events. Okay, did you mention that the story started with Goldilocks' mother sending her on an errand, warning her not to take the shortcut in the woods? And that there was a bear family who lived in the woods, and Goldilocks walked in the woods despite her mother's warnings and went in their house and tried their porridge and tried their chairs and their beds and ended up falling asleep in Baby Bear's bed. The bears came home and discovered everything Goldilocks had been doing, and then the Papa Bear said, "Now see here," and sent her on her way, and they never heard from her again. Hopefully yours sounded a little bit like how my retell sounded. And now you probably guessed that this is your important job for today. Readers, when you're done reading a story or having a book read to you today, I want you to retell it using your 5-finger retell. Okay, use that hand to help you remember everything. Character, setting, beginning, middle, and end. With that, go be readers and enjoy retelling at least one of your stories. See you next time.